great Katie Couric.
Katie Couric.
An icon in American media.
Can you talk about the way you were feeling during this period?
Co-founder of Katie Couric Media.
Let me ask you about the ITO.
We have teamed up with purpose-driven brands.
Really draw attention to some issues that I think people aren't talking about.
I want to be for people who have a real interest in listening and being smarter.
We have to continue to support science.
Things like sustainability, who care about gender equality, who care about racial justice, who care about health and wellness.
And what's more important than human beings, Maria, right?
Thank you for joining us. Katie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and so happy to be here in this cool space with so many incredible, caring, philanthropic people.
Exactly. Well, today we have a Peabody, Emmy Award-winning journalist and interviewer and expert for decades, and then you have me. And I'm the one, unfortunately, doing the interviewing. But hopefully we'll just let Katie talk a little bit more about all that she's doing and all that she's done, and we can go from there. We'll reserve a little time at the end if people want to ask a question or two. We'll see if we can squeeze that in. So Katie, today we'll start, you literally need no introduction. We had a little video. But today's topic is a little bit of mental wealth and finding success in life through purpose. And you really have continued both in your career, in your business career, your journalistic career, as well as in your personal life, and found ways to blend the two. I would love to hear a little bit about your story. And you've, in addition to being a journalist, you founded Stand Up to Cancer. You had personal tragedy that you've turned into true success and helping others. Would love to just hear a little bit about the journey and how you got to, how you were able to turn that around and really focus on helping others and finding meaning in that way.
Well, thanks, Rob. I think sometimes you find purpose and then other times purpose finds you. For people who may have watched me or were Today Show fans back in the day, some of you may be familiar with my story. In 1997, my husband Jay, who was a white-collar criminal defense lawyer at Williamson Conley in Washington, D.C., was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer, completely out of the blue. Young, healthy, never smoked, took care of himself, played lacrosse in college, and it was a shock. Our daughters at the time were 5 and 1, and I'll never forget, my life completely turned upside down, and our whole futures were shattered in an instant. And after 9 months of treatment, a treatment that had been around since the 1950s, Jay sadly collapsed on our powder room bathroom floor and died on his way to Lenox Hill Hospital. And that really changed my life so much. And then a couple of years after that, my sister Emily, who was a rising star in Virginia state politics, she was running for lieutenant governor with Mark Warner, and she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So in the span of just 5 years, my family was hit just brutally with this disease. And it set me off on a path to try to do something about that, to understand this disease, to try to increase awareness, to try to increase funding for scientists. And, these two events really changed my life forever. And as a result, Rob, I was able to really focus on something that I care deeply about. I used to be asked to do all kinds of events, to MC different things in New York, and all incredibly worthy causes. But this was my opportunity to really make a difference and hopefully change the conversation in the face of cancer. And I did that, as you know, in a variety of ways.
Yes, and specifically Stand Up to Cancer. You founded Stand Up to Cancer with 8 women, You've raised over $800 million for cancer research and awareness. What made you decide to really take it public? A lot of people, I mean, you've been in the public spotlight. I'm sure you enjoy not being in the public spotlight when you're not on camera, not on your podcast. Katie has formed Katie Couric Media and has a top podcast and a number of other outlets, daily newsletter. That has to be exhausting in and of itself. What made you decide to then take personal tragedy for your husband, your sister, knowing that your children would be part of that conversation, and really decide to push that forward back into the public spotlight?
Well, I think initially, because at the time Jay was diagnosed and died, I was the co-anchor of the Today Show, and I had this extraordinary and unique bully pulpit that I could share what I had learned about colon cancer, the #2 cancer killer of men and women combined, with a really big audience. This was long before media was so fractured and the media landscape so, what it is today, so atomized, I guess, is a way to describe it. And so I felt it would be criminal to not share with our audience all the lessons I had learned during the course of Jay's illness, that colon cancer is so preventable and it has over a 93% cure rate if it's detected early. And so that's why I went and got an on-air colonoscopy. Some people mistakenly say it was live, but it wasn't. I'm not that brave. But I did a colonoscopy to really demystify and destigmatize the process. And as a result, the University of Michigan did a study, and colon cancer screenings increased 20% after that awareness effort. And when you hear 20%, you're like, wow, that's impressive. But then you think of all the mothers and the fathers and the sisters and brothers and aunts and uncles and children, older adult children, whose lives have been saved because they were screened. And after a while, I had put together an organization called the National Colorectal Cancer Research Alliance, where we gathered experts from all over, different arenas in the field, maybe from prevention, nutrition, screening, diagnostic, treatment, therapies, and really formed this brain trust. So we did that for a couple of years, and then I started thinking, cancer scientists and cancer research needs more support, not just colon cancer, but there are also rare cancers that don't have a built-in advocacy base. And we need to support this science. And that's when I got together with 8 other very type A women, including people like Sherry Lansing and Laura Ziskin, who sadly passed away from breast cancer, and a handful of other really dynamic women from different areas. And we said, what can we do to move science forward faster? It's too frustrating. Only 1 in 10 promising NIH research grants or NCI research proposals is funded. And now, of course, it's even worse as we've seen the NIH be absolutely gutted, as well as research universities who are involved in this really critical research. So we thought back then in 2008 or 2006, let's get all these scientists together. They're working in silos. Their science is often very proprietary. If they collaborate instead of compete, wouldn't that be amazing? So we did that. And initially, Rob, people were like, I don't want to share my science with Joe Schmo from another university. And then they slowly and actually pretty quickly became so energized by this collaborative model. And now we have cancer researchers and scientists. I mean, we're talking about the smartest people in the country, you guys, who are now taking vacations together. Wow. And as a result of this collaboration and working with other organizations, by the way, working with biotech firms, working with pharmaceutical companies, our funded research has contributed to 10 new FDA-approved drugs. Wow. And it has been just remarkable to see what 9 pissed off women have been able to do in terms of changing the paradigm of cancer research. And I'm just surprised it didn't happen sooner. But now I think you see these models of collaboration happening everywhere in various diseases and various causes, because our attitude is 2 heads are better than 1, then 10 heads are better than 2. So they're sharing their ideas and their tissue samples and their incredible research, because why wouldn't they when lives are at stake? So it has just been, I think for me, I've so enjoyed and appreciated my career and continue to try to do really sound and trustworthy journalism. But being able to create this out of whole cloth has been the most gratifying thing I have ever done. And I think I can think of no better way to honor my husband. I'm getting emotional thinking about this, and my sister Emily, because you know, research like this will save people like Jay and Emily in the future, and it will either cure their disease or help them manage it. So Stand Up has been really an exciting development in my life. And you know, I should talk a little bit, Rob, about the dream teams and how we worked with. So as I mentioned, we get people like data scientists and basic biologists and cancer researchers and immunotherapy experts. And you know, now with technology and all that's happening in the world, we're at such a critical inflection point where we have the opportunity to really come up with better diagnostic tools and therapies and all kinds of things that are going to help change the face of cancer. And I brought some notes, you guys, because I have a hard time remembering what I ate for lunch yesterday, much less all these numbers. But this dream team model across disciplines has been so successful. So I just wanted to read these numbers. Over the past 17 years, Stand Up to Cancer has funded 156 collaborative research teams. Those are the dream teams, involving 3,100 scientists at 210 institutions across 16 countries.
Wow.
So as you
Amazing.
can see, we have been really able to take this model with the help of all these brilliant scientists and move science forward faster, and as a result, save lives. And it doesn't get much better than that.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I also have a personal connection in the fact that my father unfortunately passed away at 56 from complications of colon cancer. My brother died from undiagnosed heart disease at age 47. So having advancement and finding scientists, finding ways for people to collaborate across the country, across the world. You know, we were catching up a minute ago and we're talking about how you've been able to build and expand on your brand as a trustworthy journalist, and then use that to actually showcase and bring people together, bring scientists together. And you know, no matter what your political beliefs are, there is
Cancer is nonpartisan.
Cancer is nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Exactly. And also, I think, you know, there's a trust problem. No matter where you're getting your media and your news from, there's a trust problem on the internet. And so, I think, you know, one of the things you've been able to do, and you can see it from the outside, is that you've been able to bring your trust and your authenticity to this message and to this idea. Tell me a little bit about Katie Couric Media and how you've been able to cross-pollinate the two ideas and the two focuses of your life, because I think it's pretty amazing that you've been able to do that. And I think, you know, in talking about a sense of purpose, both of those elements seem to be a strong point of purpose for you, that you've been able to continue to move forward and grow and as a journalist and grow as a person and really help change the world. So tell me a little bit more.
I'm, as my colleagues at our company say, I'm addicted to the grind. I love to work. I'm insane, you know, and I just don't know what I would do if I didn't have this important work every day to keep me focused and busy and give my life purpose. And so we started a media company 7 years ago, and I think it's proved to be very successful and really the wave of the future. I saw early on in my career, after working in legacy media at ABC, NBC, and CBS, every network but Fox. And I think that I saw the terra firma of media really shifting under my feet, and this big change happening because of technology and because of, you know, being able to talk directly to an audience. So I've been able to use that as a way to continue this quote unquote parasocial relationship I have with people who have watched me through the years, who do trust me, who know that I want to give it to them straight. Sometimes it's not what they want to hear, but it's allowed me to actually talk about not only my husband and my sister, but 2 years ago, I myself was diagnosed with early stage breast cancer. And I was able to help people understand the importance of getting additional screening. 42% of women 40 and over have dense breasts, and for them, mammography is not enough. They need to get additional screening in the form of MRIs or breast ultrasounds, but many insurance companies don't pay for that. So I'm working with Rosa DeLaura of Connecticut to try to get legislation introduced that will require insurance companies to pay for supplemental screening. So I'm still working very hard, and I think my passions align so well because I can increase awareness of cancer through my media company and also work obviously simultaneously with Stand Up to Cancer to get that across. And so it's been a really successful and gratifying alliance for me to be able to give information and vetted, fact-based information to people that will help them live longer, happier, and more productive lives, and also support science. Because I think family offices are so important at this moment in time because science is being gutted in this country. $2.8 billion from NIH, 9.5 million programs and at research universities all across the country, a tremendous brain drain, scientists who are leaving the US, these incredibly talented people, because their science can't be funded. And that's why I am so thrilled to be here to just implore many of you to support science. You know, clinical trials have been stopped in their tracks, and it is going to have a devastating impact on the health of our nation for decades to come if we don't take up the slack and support this critically important research, not only with cancer, but with Alzheimer's disease, with so many issues that we're facing. And we're at that critical juncture, this inflection point that I spoke about, that if we don't come together as a country and support scientific research, you know, it's going to be devastating for people in the future. And it doesn't have to be.
I fully agree. To that point, what would you give advice to people in the audience and people as they think about going back to their offices and teams, as family offices, capital allocators? How can they as individuals make a difference and make, as I sort of, you know, as we've talked about, you know, finding purpose and finding a sense of beyond, you know, financial is obviously important part of everyone's lives, but beyond that, because especially once you've achieved success in your career, and you know, you're, as I said, an example of someone who's taken success to the top level and then continued on. And so what advice would you give people to sort of look to find the things that matter to them and look to support things like Stand Up to Cancer and other places? But what would you give on an individual level for someone to look at the things that are important to them? And
well, you know, I think that the personal becomes the philanthropic, right? You know, I became motivated by watching my 41-year-old husband die in 9 months and leave 2 little girls behind and miss all the major milestones of their lives and his life. And I think that for anyone who, I can speak about cancer, who knows someone, who cared about someone, who has a relative or friend who's living with the disease and wants to honor that person, there's no better way, I think, than to support science that will either help that individual or help people like that person in the future. I feel like Jay would be so proud of me, and my sister would be so proud of me and our efforts. And so I think that in terms of cancer research, if that's something that appeals to you and there's somebody in your life you want to, as I said, honor by supporting research, that's an incredible legacy and an incredible gift to give. And I think one of the great things about Stand Up to Cancer in particular, with this Dream Team model, you can almost tailor-make, put together an effort that will address a certain issue. So if you're interested in pancreatic cancer, or right now I'm obsessed with colon cancer affecting younger and younger people. Did you all know that by 2030,
it's become an epidemic.
The number of people under the age of 50 diagnosed with colorectal cancer is going to double. And it's really scary because the age for screening, and by the way, Stand Up to Cancer is really focused on prevention, because the mortality rate, the success rate for people who, when it's detected early, is 90%. When it's detected late, as it was in my husband and my sister's case, it's 20% or much, much less, actually. And so early detection is key. But, I think with Stand Up, you can model a dream team. And I want to start a dream team of the smartest people in the country who can try to figure out why are so many young people in their 30s and 40s with no family history being diagnosed with this disease at stage 3 or stage 4. And even though the screening was lowered to 45, only 20% of people 45 to 49 are actually getting screened for this disease. And it's not just, it's all digestive cancers. And also we're seeing a rise in breast cancer. What is going on, and what, more importantly, can we do about it to prevent this? And once we have the research, and epidemiological studies can take a very long time, but once we have the research, then we can give advice to everyone on ways to prevent this from happening to them, and these lives are being cut short so prematurely. So what I like about the stand-up model is not only can you create a dream team that is going to fit your particular passion or your desires, but then you can actually have a relationship with those scientists. I think sometimes when you give to these organizations, you don't really know where the money is going,
right?
And with Stand Up, you really form a relationship with these scientists and with our organization and with other people who care about a particular cancer as much as you do. So I think
so you're able to focus as someone from the outside giving. You're able to focus on the areas that are truly important to you, and focus on colorectal or pancreatic, et cetera, and work with that dream team?
Right, definitely. Or, as I said, finding out why so many young people are being diagnosed early, or trying to figure out a certain, maybe someone you love died of triple-negative breast cancer or is dealing with it now, and you feel like more research is needed. I don't think there's been a better time to support scientists. And science is being weaponized, and science is being, I think, what is even the right word? Degraded and unappreciated.
Diluted.
Yeah, and science is what makes this country great, the breakthroughs that we've been able to do. So, I just think there hasn't been a more important and critical and urgent time than today to support medical research.
Amazing. So I wanted to leave a little time for questions. If people had questions, we're going to ask them in a minute. But I wanted to ask one more question. How do you see, if you had to describe what you'd like to leave or describe your legacy, not only your career, not only the list of achievements which continue to grow, but your values? How do you see you as a person? How would you like to be known after you're gone? And what do you see the values that you like to pass on to your children, but also to the people who you impact through Katie Couric Media and other places?
Are you getting ready to write my obituary?
Absolutely not.
I always ask that question of people of a certain age, because I'm like, I'll put that in the can and use it later. But, I hope what I have embodied in my life is that terrible things are going to happen to all of us. We're all going to be faced with challenges, disappointments, tragedies in some cases, setbacks. And I hope that I have been a living example of how you can, it sounds so cliche now, I'm embarrassed to even say it this way, but how you can turn pain into purpose. How you can kind of get out of your own world and use an opportunity where you have been, your life has been derailed to do something positive for other people. And I hope that my daughters have seen my resiliency. I've had to be resilient in both personal and professional ways. How I've always tried to find joy in life in spite of some of the things that have happened. I think losing Jay and my sister at such young ages, I think gave me this incredible perspective, Rob, that we're all terminal, and I'm sure you have felt this about your brother, who was an amazing human being. We're all terminal. We all have a finite amount of time on the planet. Thomas Jefferson, who founded the university I went to, UVA, once said the earth belongs to the living. And I think while we're here for the time we have, we really have to try to leave it a better place than we found it, like Emerson has said. And so I hope that people see that I have tried to contribute to the world. And what do they say? Plant the tree that provides the shade for future generations. And I think we should all try to do that in some way, shape, or form. And if Jay hadn't died of cancer or my sister, would I have done this? I don't know. I don't know if I would have thought I need to do something for society at large. And I don't want to say it's been a gift, but it has been a real healing balm for me to deal with my life and what has happened, and it vanishing, and overnight, my dreams for the future to do something positive for other people. So I guess, and in my work, I continue to try to help people understand this very complicated world we're living in, where so many things are happening, everything, everywhere, all at once. And I try to just help people understand as best I can why they need to stay aware, why they need to stay awake, and what things that are happening actually mean. And so I'm just an incredibly driven and motivated person, as you can see. And I think I'll be doing this. You won't find me playing pickleball in Florida, although I am really good at pickleball and I love pickleball. And I challenge anyone here to a game of pickleball if you're into it. And I do like to have fun, but I really feel that I want to wake up every day and say, how am I going to make this day count?
Amazing. It's clear from where you've already taken your life and rebounded and found that resilience and used that resilience to strengthen your day-to-day, but also your beliefs and your values going forward, and teaching your children as well as others that you're set off, and that your path is not done yet, and you're going to continue to find more and more ways to help influence people for the better. I think that's truly impressive and truly amazing, and it's wonderful to have you here talking about all the things you've done to date and all the things you're looking to do going forward and continue to do. We have a couple minutes. Does anybody have a question? Otherwise, I can keep asking Katie questions. Anyone?
Nobody?
No question?
Really?
All right. Oh, there's one there. Hold on, we have a microphone they're going to hand you.
Thank you, sir, for asking a question.
There we go.
Hello? Oh, there we go.
Hi.
There has been a lot in the scientific community about microplastics.
Yes.
And I wonder if, and it seems to be there's nobody really understands yet what impact that's going to have on humanity and how we digest them and process them. because they're literally everywhere now. And so I'm simply curious if that's been looked into as a reason why maybe the cancer rates have increased in young people so much in the areas that you're interested in.
That's such a good point. There are a lot of theories right now, and it needs more study, but there's a lot of interest in gut health and the microbiome, which has an impact on everything from our overall health to our mental health. And there's all kinds of theories about microplastics kind of penetrating this sort of viscous barrier around the microbiome. And that's one area people are looking at. The overprescription of antibiotics, perhaps using antibiotics for viral infections, not just bacterial infections, and maybe using those too much has kind of screwed up the balance. Ultra-processed foods is something people are looking at. Obesity, obviously, but I think there's also some speculation about E. coli happening when you're really young. There was a recent study about that. So it just needs to be investigated much further. And then there's forever chemicals. And people are even looking at screens. And is that somehow disrupting our system? So there are a lot of theories out there, but microplastics is one. I was going to do a documentary. I have this spidey sense of like what's gonna surface. And I was trying to do a documentary about microplastics a couple of years ago, but I had trouble getting funding. And now it's really come to the forefront. So my spidey sense was right. But that's another way we're trying to really spread the word about all these different issues through documentary filmmaking, helping people connect the dots and understand issues. I'm working on one right now on health scientific research disparities between men and women. 90%, I think 6 times the amount of funding has been spent on Viagra and other erectile dysfunction drugs versus PMS. And ED affects 19% of men, PMS affects 90% of women. And there's been this disparity for decades. Women were only required to be included in clinical trials starting in 1993. So we're looking at that and the impact it's had on overall women's health. So that's another way I'm trying to communicate important issues to an audience at our company. And I just started a production arm if anybody's interested in documentary filmmaking. But that's a really good question, a really important issue that needs even more study, because they found microplastics in people's brains too.
Right.
And you're right, they're everywhere.
Well, no.
Do we have time for one more?
We don't have time for more questions, unfortunately.
One more? They're giving
right.
me the hook. They're
Apologize.
You need a gong.
We need a gong. So thank you guys very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank
taking
you
the
all.
time.
Thank you
Katie,
for everything
thank you very
you
much.
do. Thank you.